One trend that I'm really trying to pioneer in the compliance world specifically is this term of modular compliance. Compliance does not have to take forever and have millions of pages of policies that no one is going to read. Your compliance program should have a skeleton foundation that you don't really touch. So I'm taking that first crack at, okay, here's what's on the market today for guidance. Here's how we make it fit, and here's what we need to consider next as it becomes more affordable and as more fintechs of all sizes start adopting it.
Welcome to The Edge for Tomorrow, the podcast where founders and leaders in fintech and financial services reveal their strategies for success, growth, and staying ahead. I'm Tracy, CEO of Windsor Edge, and my job is simple, helping businesses grow faster and smarter. Let's jump into today's episode. I'm here today with Christina Rea, founder and CEO at RayCor Consulting. Christina, thanks so much for being here with me.
Thank you for having me, Tracy. I'm really excited to join.
Let's dive into your path to leadership. What called you to be a leader in fintech?
I graduated from law school during the 2008 recession, and everything millennials thought they knew about getting jobs and getting set up for life was completely turned on its head, and not much has changed in the nearly 20 years since it's happened. So I had a few years where I was struggling to even find footing in any industry, to be honest, and my background before law school was in finance. So in 2011, 2012, a lot of the big banks were getting hit with the consent orders. They were hiring hand over fist to have lawyers and whomever might have a pertinent background come in to help them get their anti-money laundering and compliance programs cleaned up. Most of us were going in-house at the big banks or the big consulting companies. I was at HSBC, which was the land of gray suits and even grayer decision making, despite all of the regulatory imperatives that were going on at the bank. It was an interesting time because, as many women in this industry, I was frequently one of the only women in the room, where you have to work twice as hard to be seen as half as credible. And one interesting lesson I learned early on was that just simply being smart wasn't enough. To really be in the corporate world in that regard and climb the ladder, you had to be small, palatable, and quiet. And I learned pretty quick that wasn't me. And I went through a lot of heartache trying to figure out what was next because I'm someone who survived a lot before I ever even stepped into that role. Just a background of trauma shaped me and gave me both some grit and some radar. And as I went through that process, I realized I didn't want to follow rules. I'm not much of a rule follower. I wanted to write them. So I left the bank and I had a very interesting opportunity at a startup. I didn't know the term RegTech at the time, but that's technically what they were. They were trying to develop smart data solutions for banks to streamline compliance processes. And that's when I started learning more about the intersection of finance and technology. And fast forward 10 years later from when I left HSBC to start that role to RayCor, a few years ago, I launched RayCor Consulting to build a new kind of compliance company. My focus is on fintech. I do learn about the technology. I have to stay on top of the tech to do what I do in this field. But it's important to me to have a company where not only is the work sharp, but the people are human and leadership doesn't require shrinking yourself to fit into someone else's mold.
You said three words that women were expected to uphold. The three words were small, palatable, and quiet. Can you speak a little bit more to how you figured out that was the type of person they wanted women to show up as?
So I started speaking up when things didn't make sense or when I thought that we could improve processes. And I learned extremely quickly that they weren't looking for that. They were looking for me to come in, fill quotas, make sure my team filled quotas, and not question the status quo. So I started getting into trouble. I started getting yelled at by my direct line manager because I learned pretty quick to bypass him and go directly to the director when something needed to get done. Because that's what he would do anyway. He would say to me, "Oh, I'll get back to you," and then he would go to the director. But it would take twice as long, and I sat 3 seats down from the director, so I thought, why don't I just skip the middleman and get something done faster? And I was not popular for that decision. I wasn't popular because I didn't like to just sit in my seat for visibility purposes. If there wasn't something to do or something that I was actively working on, I would get up, I would talk to other people, I would try to learn other areas of compliance. That certainly wasn't popular. I was the squeaky wheel, and it was not appreciated in that department.
It sounds like you have a lot of courage to do what you think is right and what will get the job done.
It was hard at the time because you start to question yourself, and I think women especially are victims of this that imposter syndrome. Do I really know what I'm doing? Are they right about me that I don't know what I'm doing and that I should do things differently? If I leave here, will I ever get another job? Am I actually terrible at this? There was a lot of personal growth during that time, but where I am now, I think every adverse lesson that I had to learn, because it put me where I am now, it gave me the confidence I have.
That's beautiful. I'm sure hearing your stories and your experiences is very helpful.
That's my goal. I always just want to help women of any age, honestly, whether it's a younger generation or even older women, believe in themselves and get their piece of the pie because there's pie out there and there's enough for all of us. So I want to help everyone make sure they get their share. To your point about courageous, one thing I learned the difference between being brave and being courageous. I think being brave is when you actually have no fear of doing something. Some people are just naturally fearless, maybe about skydiving or something I would never dream to do. But being courageous is when you're afraid of something and you do it anyway. And I can't give anyone a better lesson, no matter what it is, whether it's personal, professional, facing something that seems scary, facing the music on something you know you did wrong, standing up for something you believe in, at a job that wants to beat you down, doing it anyway, even when you're scared, that's what gets rid of the imposter syndrome more than anything.
I just I'm very moved by that, actually. I've never thought about the difference between being brave and being courageous. Thanks for sharing that. Let's dive into all the different financial niches that you were in. I'd love to hear how banking and RegTech and crypto, all of this knowledge base that you gained in finance, how that reshaped your understanding of the industry as a whole and what you wanted to do with it.
Yeah, I think that's a great question because a lot of people, I'll say to compliance specifically, that work in some form of fintech compliance got started in traditional banking, TradFi, whatever you want to call it. And I think banking does a great job teaching us how the systems work, but it also teaches us how we protect power really over progress. So you learn the basics of the rules and the regulations when you're in the bank, but the regs and the rules in this little field of compliance, I specialize in anti-money laundering, they're there to protect the bank specifically, not the customers and the clients. They have the mindset of if it works reasonably well or not even that great, but it's not completely broken, it doesn't need to be fixed and we don't need to do anything to change it. Status quo is good enough. So I'm grateful for that background because as I've gone into fintech where people don't know what they don't know when it comes to compliance, it's given me that solid foundation of I understand what the point of the law is and ultimately what we're trying to get at in determining where funds are coming from and where they're going. Moving into RegTech, that gave me a lot of tools to understand how we're modernizing risk. In the world of compliance, processes and things that we have to do used to be very manual. A lot of technology has come out trying to make that more efficient, trying to automate everything, and trying to make us understand risk at a more micro level when it comes to data, which is something that a lot of tools and solutions on the market work at continuously. There's a lot of ways to manipulate data to come to smarter decisions than doing things from a manual perspective and missing a lot of the picture. Crypto specifically, crypto has definitely been for me at least the most chaotic area. There were a lot of regulatory gray zones. As time has gone on, state, federal, international regulators have issued guidance and given us more understanding of how they expect crypto to be treated from a regulatory standpoint in the financial ecosystem. having all of that background, the traditional banking and kind of the traditional foundation, learning more about modernizing risk, and then having crypto throw all of that against the wall to see what sticks and figure it out. I feel like now I've heard some people who are in compliance describe themselves as advisor. I'm here to advisor. I'm here to advise you. I'm not here to tell you what to do or take anything away from you. But I also like to say that I think I act as a translator. Working at banks, I can speak the language of traditional risk. Working for startups and fintechs, I can also speak scaling startups and tech chaos and figure out how do we meld all of that together so that I can go to a client and say, here are your risks, here are your options. I'm a huge fan of giving people options. I do this in my personal life too. You have a problem? Okay, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to tell you what
Yes.
the options are. And it's your choice. If you want to do it this way, you mitigate the risk down to 10%. If you don't want to do it this way, you're assuming a risk of 70%. It's your choice what you ultimately want to do. And I try to help now my clients build bridges between these worlds and bring them perspective, especially in the regulatory landscape, the ability to say, here's what's coming, here's how we can get ahead of it now if this is important to you. That's something I do all the time and something I've learned is really important when translating these different languages to startup founders.
What type of industry trends or innovation are you seeing right now? And what are you excited about moving forward into the rest of the year?
AI is everywhere. It's in our RegTech tools, it's in the FinTech itself. It's starting to become a buzzword in compliance. So I've had talks with people where we talk about compliance and how it's always traditionally been considered overhead and a blocker to innovation. And I don't see it that way. Me personally, what I'm working on is how do we govern and validate the AI as compliance officers? I'm excited to share this white paper because a lot of what's been talked about so far this year is what AI can do, the tech itself can do to help compliance officers. And that's all well and good if you work at a company that has the money or the desire to use these tools.
Mhm.
A lot of companies aren't there yet in terms of money, or we're not big enough, and it's fine, it is what it is. But if you are there or you are considering it, I'm taking the conversation to the natural next level. One thing regulators come in to and talk about with compliance teams is something called model validation. Whatever your tools are that you're using, whatever your systems are, whether you built it internally, whether it's some sort of outsourced tool that's helping with your onboarding, your transaction monitoring, sanction screening, regardless of what it is, they want to know that you understand how that tool works, that you have visibility into how the algorithms are working. You have the ability to calibrate and tune the tool or work with the partner to do that to make sure it fits to your business model. Inevitably, they're going to want AI to do the same thing. Globally, there's not a lot of guidance around AI governance. I think there's one, I forget the standard number, there's one international standard around this that's the first burgeoning piece of guidance around this. And I do reference it in my paper. But beyond that, we're still using a lot of other models, like standards around model risk management, or even some more traditional kind of AT data security standards. So they don't quite fit the mold yet. So I'm taking that first crack at, okay, here's what's on the market today for guidance. Here's how we make it fit, and here's what we need to consider next. So it'll be a stepping stone that we can continue to build on as more AI tech comes out, as it becomes more affordable, and as more fintechs of all sizes start adopting it.
I'm excited to see how you think things are going to change in this space.
I'm trying to make compliance accessible and more approachable, not only from an educational standpoint of what is it and what is it really doing. The law is the law, but the law doesn't give you prescribed procedures and processes. One trend that I'm really trying to pioneer in the compliance world specifically is this term of modular compliance. Compliance does not have to take forever and have millions of pages of policies that no one is going to read. Your compliance program should have a skeleton foundation that you don't really touch unless something in the business changes drastically. So, your basic anti-money laundering and sanctions policy should be the building block you build everything else off of. And then everything else, as you change products, jurisdictions, clients, you can update your procedures, but you should be able to know where in the procedure you need to update so you're not having to read and rehash the whole entire thing. So one thing as I've worked with a lot of startups, and not a lot of startups, not every founder can afford a full compliance team and the whole package right up front, and they shouldn't have to. I'm trying to take pieces of that and break them down into digestible tools. For example, I have a couple of template packages where early stage companies can launch and grow responsibly with maybe one or two pieces of the red tape that they have to go through taken down for them because it's a lot. The two I'm working on right now are called AML Spark and MTL Fast Track. One is meant to just kickstart your basic AML program with the documents you need. The other is for companies that are trying to get the money transmitter licenses in the US, of which, if you're going to operate in 50 states, you need 50 different licenses. It's very time consuming and outdated. I'm trying to help them speed that along a little bit. I'm going to launch a prototype and proof of concept for a product called Trace, where it will be my goal specifically to help compliance officers risk assess and govern and validate their AI tools once they get to that point. There are lots of wonderful consultants and experts in this industry, but I hear a lot, oh, things take time. Yes, some things do take time. Some things get drawn out longer than they need to in the name of maybe making more money or trying to make things seem more mysterious than they are. I will try to take some of the mystery away and say, this is what you need at the outset. And as we go through this, what more you will need as you continue to scale.